You know what breaks my heart? It's watching someone with real talent, genuine potential, standing right at the edge of something remarkable, and they pull back. They hesitate. They give it half their effort and wonder why they're getting half results or no results at all. And here's the thing that really gets me. It's not just once. It's a pattern. It's the same person making the same promise to themselves on January 1st, then again on their birthday, then again when something scares them enough to pay attention for a moment. They say, this time it's different. This time I'm really going to do it. But 3 weeks later, maybe a month, if they're stubborn, they're right back where they started. Sound familiar? Let me tell you, I've been there. I've watched it in others, and if I'm being honest, I've felt that pull in myself. Here's what I've learned after all these years of studying success and failure, of watching people rise and watching people fade away. Partial commitment is not a strategy. It's not a legitimate approach to anything worth having. When you go into something giving it 50% of your effort, you're not setting yourself up for 50% of the result. You're setting yourself up for disappointment, frustration, and another piece of evidence that you'll use against yourself later. See, every time you quit, every time you ease up when things get hard, every time you tell yourself maybe next time, you're not just failing at that particular goal. You're teaching yourself something far more dangerous. You're teaching yourself that you're the kind of person who doesn't follow through. Let me tell you about a moment that changed everything for me. I was in my late 20s, working hard, but not getting anywhere near the results I wanted. I'd start a new approach to my business with all this energy, all this enthusiasm. I'd tell myself this was it. This was the breakthrough. But then the newness would wear off. The initial excitement would fade. The work would start feeling like work instead of an adventure, and I'd find myself coasting. Not quitting exactly. I was too proud to be a quitter, but I wasn't really in it anymore either. I was present but not engaged, showing up but not performing, and the results showed it. One day, I'm sitting in a small coffee shop and I see this old friend of mine. He'd started a business around the same time I did, had the same opportunities, maybe even less natural talent if I'm being honest, but he'd blown right past me. He was succeeding in ways I was still dreaming about. So I bought him coffee and I asked him straight out, what's the difference between us? Why are you getting these results? And I'm still struggling. You know what he said? He looked at me like I'd asked the most obvious question in the world and said, Jim, you're still keeping your options open. You've got 1 foot in and 1 foot out. Me, I burned the boats. I made it so I couldn't go back. There's no plan B here. This works, or I learn from it and make it work. That conversation haunted me for weeks because he was right. I'd been protecting myself from failure by never fully committing. I thought I was being smart, being reasonable, being responsible by keeping my safety nets in place. But what I was really doing was guaranteeing that I'd never know what I was truly capable of. I was choosing the comfort of an excuse over the discomfort of total effort. And let me tell you something, that comfort was costing me everything I said I wanted. Here's a truth that most people don't want to hear. Your comfort zone is killing you. Not quickly, not dramatically, but slowly, quietly, like a sedative. You feel safe in there. You feel protected. But what you're really doing is protecting yourself from growth, from opportunity, from the life you claim you want to live. Every time you choose comfort over commitment, you're making a vote. You're voting on what kind of person you're going to be. And those votes add up. They compound. After enough votes for comfort, for the easy way, for half measures, you become someone you don't recognize. Someone who's got all these dreams, but none of the discipline. All these ideas, but none of the implementation. I want you to think about something for a moment. Think about the goals you set for yourself a year ago. Where are you with those? If the answer is no, and for most people it is, I want you to ask yourself, was it because it was impossible? Or was it because you gave up when it got hard? Because there's a massive difference between those two things. One is about the goal being wrong. The other is about you being wrong about how much effort you were willing to put in. See, most people overestimate what they can do in a day and underestimate what they can do in a year with consistent effort. They think success is about these massive actions, these dramatic moments. So they wait for the inspiration, wait for the motivation, wait for the perfect moment to really go all in. And while they're waiting, life is passing by, opportunities are disappearing. The competition is moving forward, and they're still sitting there, waiting to feel ready, waiting to feel motivated, waiting for conditions to be perfect before they give it everything. Let me tell you what I know about perfect conditions. They don't exist. Not in business, not in relationships, not in personal development, not anywhere. There will always be something. There will always be a reason to wait, a reason to hold back, a reason to keep something in reserve. The economy isn't quite right. Your circumstances aren't ideal. You don't have enough knowledge yet. You need to prepare more. These aren't reasons, they're excuses dressed up in reasonable clothes. And they're costing you years of your life. You know what happens when you keep operating at 50%? You get 50% results, sure, but it's worse than that. You start to believe that 50% results are all you're capable of. You start to identify as someone who's just not lucky, someone who works hard but never catches a break, someone who's tried everything. But you haven't tried everything. You've tried multiple things at 50%. You've dabbled. You've tested the water. You've never actually committed to something so completely that failure would hurt, so you've protected yourself from the pain of failing, but you've also blocked yourself from the joy of succeeding. Here's what I want you to understand. Every time you quit, every time you ease up, every time you choose comfort over growth, you're making a deposit in the wrong account. You're investing in your own limitations. You're building evidence for yourself that you can't be trusted, that you won't follow through, that you're not the kind of person who finishes what they start. And that evidence compounds, it grows, until one day you wake up and you've got this mountain of proof that you're not capable of more. But it's not real proof. It's just proof that you've never really tried. I remember sitting in my car one night after another day of going through the motions. I'd done the minimum required, checked the boxes, looked busy. But I knew deep in my gut that I hadn't really given it my all. And I felt this weight, this heaviness in my chest. It wasn't guilt exactly. It was something worse. It was disappointment in myself. I'd let myself down again. I'd made another deposit in that account of evidence against myself. And I realized something that night that changed everything. The person I was disappointing wasn't my boss, wasn't my family, wasn't my friends. It was me. I was breaking promises to myself. And if you can't trust yourself, if you can't count on yourself to do what you say you're going to do, then what do you really have? The truth is, we've all been training ourselves for years. Some of us have been training ourselves to finish, to push through, to keep going when it's hard. But if you're honest, if you really look at your patterns, many of us have been training ourselves to quit. We've been practicing the art of almost. We get close, we get uncomfortable, and we tap out. We've gotten really good at having reasons why now isn't the time, why this particular thing wasn't quite right, why we'll do it next time. We've become experts at rationalizing our way out of commitment. But here's the beautiful thing. If you've trained yourself to quit, you can train yourself to finish. If you've been practicing half effort, you can practice full effort. If you've been collecting evidence against yourself, you can start collecting evidence for yourself. It's not easy. It's not quick, but it's possible. And it starts with a decision, not a wish, not a hope, not a I'll try, a decision, a real no going back, this is happening decision. The kind of decision that changes everything because you finally stopped negotiating with yourself about whether you're going to do it. You've decided you're going to do it, and now the only question is how. Now let me tell you something that might surprise you. Motivation is overrated. I know, coming from someone who speaks about personal development, that sounds strange. But hear me out. Motivation is like a spark. It's that initial burst of energy that gets you started. It's exciting, it feels good, and it makes you believe anything is possible. But sparks don't last. They flare up bright and hot, and then they fade. What you need isn't more motivation. What you need is commitment. And there's a world of difference between the two. Motivation says, I feel like doing this today. Commitment says, I'm doing this whether I feel like it or not. Motivation is an emotion. Commitment is a decision. Motivation comes and goes with your mood, with the weather, with how well you slept last night. Commitment stays, regardless of how you feel. And here's the key. Going all in isn't about being motivated every single day. It's about being committed even on the days when you're not motivated at all. I'll give you an example from my own life. There was a period where I committed to reading every single day. Not just when I felt like it, not just when I found an interesting book, but every single day without exception. Some days I was excited about it. I couldn't wait to get to my reading chair and dive in. Other days, I was tired, distracted, busy, and reading was the last thing I wanted to do. But I did it anyway. Why? Because I'd made a commitment, and I understood something crucial. My feelings about the activity were irrelevant to whether or not I was going to do it. That's what going all in really means. It means you've decided that this thing, whatever your this is no longer optional. It's no longer subject to how you feel in the moment. It's not up for negotiation based on circumstances. You've moved it from the category of things I'd like to do into the category of things I do. Period. And that shift, that internal shift from preference to commitment, that's where everything changes. See, when you're only motivated, you're always looking for reasons to act. You need the right conditions, the right mood, the right encouragement. But when you're committed, you stop looking for reasons and you just act. The decision has already been made. You're not deciding each day whether you're going to do it. You decided once, and now you're just executing on that decision. Do you wake up every morning and decide whether you're going to brush your teeth? No, you just do it. That's the level of automaticity, of non-negotiability that real commitment creates. Here's what most people don't understand about partial commitment. It doesn't give you partial results that you can be satisfied with. It gives you partial results that compound into massive disappointment. Let me explain what I mean. Say you commit to something at 50%. You're half-hearted about it. You do it sometimes, skip it other times. You give medium effort on the days you show up. Over a year, you're not getting 50% of what you could have gotten. You're getting maybe 10%, maybe less, because there's no momentum, no compounding, no real progress. Meanwhile, someone who goes all in at 100% doesn't just get double your results. They get exponentially more because their efforts compound, build on each other, create momentum that carries them forward. And here's the really important part. You owe yourself this level of commitment. Not because of what you'll get, though you'll get plenty. You owe it to yourself because anything less is a form of self-betrayal. Every time you make a promise to yourself and break it, every time you set a standard and fail to meet it, every time you know what you should do and you do something else instead, you're betraying yourself. You're telling yourself that you don't matter enough to keep your own promises. And that erodes something inside you that's hard to rebuild. Think about the relationships in your life that matter most. How would those relationships survive if you only showed up when you felt like it? If you only kept your promises when it was convenient? If you only gave effort when you were motivated? They'd fall apart, wouldn't they? So why do we think we can treat ourselves that way and still have a healthy relationship with ourselves? Why do we think we can break promises to ourselves repeatedly and still maintain self-respect, self-trust, self-confidence? The truth is, we can't. Every broken promise to yourself is a withdrawal from your self-trust account. And when that account runs dry, when you've made too many withdrawals and not enough deposits, you stop believing in yourself. You stop trusting that when you say you're going to do something, you'll actually do it. And once you've lost trust in yourself, everything becomes harder. Every new goal feels impossible because you've got all this evidence that you don't follow through. But going all in, that's a deposit. Every day you show up, every day you do what you said you'd do, every day you honor your commitment to yourself, you're making a deposit. You're building evidence that you're someone who follows through, someone who can be trusted, someone who does what they say they're going to do. And that evidence compounds too. It builds and builds until you start to see yourself differently. You start to identify as someone who finishes, someone who's committed, someone who goes all in. Now, I want to address something because I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, but what if I go all in and I fail? What if I give it everything and it doesn't work out? Let me tell you something. That fear, that's the fear that's been holding you back your entire life. That's the fear that keeps you playing small, staying safe, giving partial effort. Because if you only give 50%, you've got a built-in excuse when it doesn't work. You can say, well, I didn't really try my hardest, so it doesn't count. But if you go all in and you fail, you can't hide behind that excuse anymore. But here's what that fear is really about. It's not about failing. It's about finding out who you really are. It's about discovering your actual limits instead of your imagined ones. And yes, that's scary, but it's also the only way to grow. It's the only way to know what you're truly capable of. Because right now you don't know. You think you do, but you don't. You've never really pushed yourself to find out. So now you're probably asking yourself, okay, Jim, I understand the importance of commitment. I understand that. I need to go all in. But how? What does that actually look like in practical terms? And that's a fair question. Because understanding something intellectually and implementing it practically are two completely different things. Let me share with you what I've learned about building the actual structure, the daily architecture that makes going all in possible. First thing you need to understand, environment beats willpower every single time. You cannot rely on motivation. You cannot rely on willpower. Those resources are limited. They fluctuate. They run out. What you need is an environment that makes going all in the path of least resistance. You need to set up your life so that doing the right thing is easier than doing the wrong thing. Let me tell you what I mean. When I finally decided to go all in on my personal development, I didn't just make a promise to myself and hope for the best. I engineered my environment. I took every book that wasn't about personal development, business, or philosophy, and I removed them from my house. I canceled subscriptions to things that were stealing my time. I changed my morning routine, so the first thing I saw when I woke up was my reading chair with a book already open waiting for me. I made it harder to fail than to succeed. That's not willpower, that's strategy. You want to know why most people fail at their commitments? They leave too many exits available. They keep their escape routes open. They say they're going all in, but they're still keeping Plan B warm and ready just in case. Let me tell you something about Plan B. Its very existence undermines Plan A. When things get tough, and they will get tough, you'll take the easy route. You'll retreat to what's comfortable. You'll tell yourself you gave it a shot. But maybe Plan B was the right choice all along. That's why you need to burn the boats. You need to make going back impossible. Now, I'm not telling you to be reckless. I'm not saying quit your job tomorrow without any preparation. What I'm saying is that in your mind, in your heart, in your daily actions, there needs to be no question about whether you're committed. You need to remove the mental escape hatches. Stop telling yourself, I'll try this for a while and see how it goes. That's not commitment. That's an experiment. And experiments can be abandoned when they get uncomfortable. Let's talk about daily disciplines, because this is where going all in actually happens. It's not in the big dramatic moments. It's in what you do when nobody's watching. It's in the small decisions you make every single day. You know what separates someone who's all in from someone who's just interested? About 6 hours. 6 hours of what they do differently each day. The person who's all in wakes up earlier, not because they're superhuman, but because they've decided that their goals matter more than extra sleep. They've decided that building their future is more important than the comfort of staying under the covers. And let me tell you, that decision made every single morning, that's powerful. That's training yourself to choose discomfort for progress over comfort for stagnation. The person who's all in reads every day. Not when they have time. They make time. They understand that formal education will make you a living, but self-education will make you a fortune. They're feeding their mind, growing their knowledge, expanding their capabilities. 30 minutes a day, that's it. But it's 30 minutes every single day without exception. Over a year, that's 182 hours of learning. Over 5 years, that's 912 hours. You show me someone who spends 912 hours learning about their field, about business, about success principles, and I'll show you someone who's transformed. The person who's all in is careful about their associations. They understand that you become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So they audit their relationships. They're not being cruel, they're being strategic. They spend less time with people who drain them and more time with people who challenge them. They seek out mentors, even if that means reading books by people they'll never meet. They join groups where they're the least successful person in the room because they know that's where growth happens. Here's something else that matters. The person who's all in has systems, not just goals. Goals are important, sure, but systems are what gets you there. Let me give you an example. Saying I want to lose 30 pounds is a goal. Creating a system where you meal prep every Sunday, exercise every morning at 6 a.m. and track your food intake daily, that's a system. The goal tells you where you want to go. The system gets you there. And the beautiful thing about systems is they remove the decision fatigue. You're not deciding each day whether to work out. You work out at 6 a.m. That's what you do. It's part of your system. Now let's address something important. Setbacks are going to happen. Failure is going to happen. That's not a possibility. That's a certainty. The question is not whether you'll face obstacles, but how you'll respond when you do. And this is where you see the real difference between someone who's all in and someone who's just testing the waters. When someone who's not fully committed faces a setback, they take it as a sign. See, I knew this wouldn't work. I knew I wasn't cut out for this. They used the setback as permission to quit. They were looking for an excuse, and now they've found one. But when someone who's truly committed faces a setback, they take it as information. They ask, what can I learn from this? What needs to adjust? How can I approach this differently? The setback doesn't change their commitment. It just changes their strategy. I remember a period in my business where everything seemed to be going wrong. A major deal fell through. A partner backed out. Cash flow was tight. I had every reason to quit, every logical justification to go back to what I was doing before. But I'd made a decision. I was all in. So instead of quitting, I got curious. What was I missing? What needed to change? What could I learn from this? And you know what I discovered? The problems weren't with my commitment or my goals. They were with my approach. I adjusted, adapted, and moved forward. That business eventually became one of my biggest successes, but only because I refused to let temporary failure become permanent defeat. Here's a concept I want you to really understand. Pay the price in advance. Most people want to pay for success in installments. They want to put in a little effort, see a little result, then decide if they want to continue. But that's not how it works. Success requires that you pay the full price up front, often without any guarantee of the return. You put in the work before you see the results. You make the sacrifices before you get the rewards. You become the person who deserves success before success shows up. And let me tell you, the price of success paid in advance weighs ounces. The price of regret paid later weighs tons. You can pay now in discipline, in effort, in sacrifice. Or you can pay later in disappointment, in what ifs, in if only I had. But you're going to pay either way. The question is, which price are you willing to pay? Another thing about going all in, you need to measure your progress, but you need to measure the right things. Most people measure outcomes. How much money they made, how much weight they lost, how many clients they signed, and outcomes matter, don't get me wrong. But when you're in the middle of the process, outcomes can be discouraging because they lag behind your efforts. What you need to measure are your inputs. Did you do the work today? Did you follow your system? Did you show up with full effort? I kept a journal for years where every day I would simply mark whether I'd done what I committed to do. Read for 30 minutes. Check or no check. Made my sales calls. Check or no check. Worked on my skills. Check or no check. Some days I had all checks. Some days I didn't. But over time, as I got more checks than gaps, I started to see something. My identity was changing. I was becoming someone who followed through, someone who kept commitments, someone who was all in. And as my identity changed, my results changed too. Let me give you one more piece of practical wisdom. Going all in doesn't mean being rigid. It doesn't mean you can never adjust your approach or change your strategy. What it means is that your commitment to the outcome stays firm while your methods stay flexible. You're committed to building a successful business, but if one approach isn't working, you try another. You're committed to getting healthy, but if one exercise program isn't sustainable, you find one that is. The destination stays fixed. The path can change. That's not lack of commitment. That's wisdom. Let me tell you about something that doesn't get talked about enough. What happens inside you when you finally stop negotiating with your potential and start demanding it? There's a shift that occurs, something profound that changes the way you see yourself and the way you move through the world. It's not immediate, and it's not dramatic in the way you might expect, but it's real, and it's powerful, and it's worth every ounce of effort it takes to get there. When you truly go all in, when you honor your commitments to yourself day after day after day, something remarkable happens. You start to respect yourself. Not in some abstract way, not in some self-help affirmation kind of way, but in a deep, genuine, earned way. You look at yourself in the mirror and you know, really know, that you're someone who does what they say they're going to do. And that changes everything. See, self-confidence isn't something you can fake or manufacture or repeat in affirmations until it sticks. Real confidence comes from evidence. It comes from keeping promises to yourself. It comes from doing hard things when you didn't feel like it. It comes from pushing through when everything in you wanted to quit. That's where confidence is born, in the gap between what's comfortable and what you do anyway. And here's what's beautiful about this. When you change your relationship with yourself, every other relationship in your life changes too. When you know you can count on yourself, you show up differently for other people. You make better promises because you understand the weight of a promise. You set better boundaries because you respect yourself enough to protect your commitments. You become more reliable, more trustworthy, more solid. Not because you're trying to impress anyone, but because that's who you've become. Think about the people in your life who are watching you. Your children, if you have them. Your younger siblings. Your friends who are struggling with the same things you're struggling with. They're watching to see if it's possible. They're watching to see if someone can actually do it, actually commit, actually follow through, actually change their life through sustained effort. And when you go all in, when you show them through your actions that it's possible, you give them permission to believe it's possible for them too. That's the ripple effect of commitment. It spreads. Not because you're preaching or lecturing or telling people what they should do, but because you're living proof that it works. You become evidence that someone can decide to change and actually change. That someone can set a goal and actually achieve it. That someone can say this time is different and have it actually be different. But let's talk about something even more important than what other people see. Let's talk about what you know. Late at night, when it's just you and your thoughts, when there's no one to impress and nothing to prove, what do you know about yourself? Do you know you gave it everything? Do you know you held nothing back? Do you know that whatever the outcome, you honored yourself by giving your absolute best? That's the question that matters. Not whether you succeeded by someone else's standards. Not whether you impressed people or made a certain amount of money or achieved some external marker of success. The question is, can you live with yourself? Can you look back without regret? Can you say honestly that you gave it everything you had? I've met a lot of people in my years, successful and unsuccessful by conventional measures. And I'll tell you what I've learned. The successful ones aren't necessarily happier. But the ones who gave it their all, who went all in regardless of the outcome, they have something the others don't. They have peace. They have the quiet satisfaction of knowing they didn't leave anything on the table. They didn't hold back. They didn't play it safe. They lived fully, committed fully, and whatever happened, they can live with themselves. Because here's the truth. You're going to be living with yourself for the rest of your life. Every decision you make, every commitment you keep or break, every time you go all in or hold back, you're building the person you have to be with every single day. You're creating the internal voice that will either encourage you or criticize you. You're establishing the level of self-respect you'll carry with you into every situation. And years from now, when you look back at this moment, at this time in your life, you're going to ask yourself a question: did I do it? Did I finally stop making excuses and start making progress? Did I stop protecting myself from failure and start reaching for success? Did I go all in? The beautiful thing is, you get to decide the answer to that question right now. Not tomorrow, not next week, not when conditions are perfect. Right now, this moment is the only moment you have to make that decision. And let me tell you something, this moment is enough. You're enough. Everything you need to go all in is already inside you. It always has been. You've just been negotiating with it, bargaining with it, trying to find a way to get what you want without giving what it costs. But deep down, you know. You know you're capable of more. You know you've been holding back. You know you've been playing small in a life that was meant to be lived large. And you know somewhere in that quiet place inside you where truth lives, that you owe it to yourself to finally, completely, without reservation or hesitation, go all in this time. Not because it'll be easy, not because success is guaranteed, but because anything less is a betrayal of who you're capable of becoming. And you've spent enough time betraying that person. It's time to become them.